Hi there, Jacqueline. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. I love just giggling with you and it's a secret between, Debbie and I what we were just giggling about, but I just love that we can create any conversation out of
I agree.
absolutely nothing.
I agree. Well, welcome to Retirement Your Way. And once again, welcome to my lovely Jacqueline, one of my favorite people on the planet.
Oh, Debbie, I just love you so much. I
Well,
mean,
same right back at you.
seriously. But I do want to point out to our listeners because this is a fun fact that I just learned last week. The painting in your background, you painted that.
Yes.
So that
Yes.
bird is what you painted, and we talk about, artistic, and I'm doing some bridal or wedding, I guess crafts right now, and it's so fun to talk about it with you, and you have so much talent. I mean,
Well, thank you.
incredible.
Thank you.
What
When you
other
live a long
things?
time, hopefully you develop those
Yes.
talents along the way.
Yes. Yeah, and it's like an escape, for our listeners and viewers that are artistic or like doing crafts and stuff. I think it's so important to set aside time
Oh,
to do that in life. Like, we talk
definitely.
about our mental health all the time on the show, and truly,
Mhm.
whether you're in retirement, out of retirement, whatever, I mean, do some crafts, set aside some time to do that.
Or play an instrument, learn a new language. I mean,
Yes.
you need to have something outside your work life and also outside taking care of your family and those responsibilities that come along. You need to kind of feed your soul. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, we're just spilling out Debbie fun facts today. So we're going to keep this going. And Debbie, you also know sign language.
I'm
So
learning sign language.
okay. Well,
Slowly.
what
It's harder as you get older. Learn it
yes.
when you're young if you can.
Yep. And you're teaching me a little bit,
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And
I love you.
yep, I love you.
There are
Well,
quite a few symbols for that, but that one is an easy one to do.
feel like the mama llama. Have you seen
Yeah.
that? That's what that
Yeah.
reminds me.
It's very similar to the Texas one, so
Oh, well, I'm excited about this topic today. So, Debbie, why don't you introduce the topic to our listeners and viewers and tell us kind of what even is a beneficiary?
okay, great. Well, I thought about this in meeting with a few clients over the past couple of weeks, and I realized, whoo, too many people believe that once you set everything up, it's a one and done. And so, to discuss what a beneficiary is, I mean, as an estate planner, I want to make sure that everything is set up so that your legacy is truly what you want to leave to those that you love, or not necessarily people. Sometimes it is a charity or something
Mhm.
else that's important to you. And so, most people are used to setting up a beneficiary when they set up any kind of financial account or when they do a will or a trust. And unfortunately, a lot of people leave it. Once that's done, they leave it and they never go back to review. So a beneficiary is who you want to leave your assets to. Some common mistakes are that they will typically only do a primary beneficiary.
Mm.
And so we'll discuss a little bit about why that's a dangerous thing. So you need secondary beneficiaries as well. So a secondary means, or a contingent means, if the primary one is not there, for example, if they have passed away, it will automatically pass along to the contingent. So that is considered like the secondary beneficiary.
Okay.
um, so it's to be done correctly, you want it to pass directly to your beneficiaries, which a couple weeks ago we talked about wills and trust. And the beautiful thing about a trust is that helps bypass probate.
Mhm.
It's not always necessary. For example, when you purchase an annuity automatically bypasses probate. And so when you set up the annuity, your financial advisor will have you set up that primary and contingent beneficiaries. But like I said, it's not always a one and done, because if life circumstances happen and you don't go back and change those beneficiaries, it's often too late.
Well,
And
and speaking of
that's
that,
dangerous.
Debbie, I mean, a beneficiary trumps a
Yes.
a will and a
Will or a
trust.
trust.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's so important to get the beneficiaries down because essentially, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, the beneficiary is the most important thing to have correct.
I agree. I agree. And so in annual reviews, when I meet with the clients, it will be, okay, let's look over your beneficiaries. So even if it is something that our office is not personally responsible for, it will benefit my clients if I go over all of those beneficiary informations for them and with them to make sure that they have it done correctly. So for example, the two issues that I came about with my clients lately, one of them was getting ready to retire and also had done an investment through our company, and in checking with her employer discovered that in 35 years that company had changed from paper, the old-fashioned way of doing everything, to electronic. So someone at their company set it up electronically for them all, and they did not put it in correctly. So she discovered that they did not have her husband down as they didn't have any beneficiary set up, but especially they didn't have her husband. And she looked at me and went, if I had died, my husband would not have received my pension, which he rightfully, has
Yep.
rights to. And she said, how did I miss that? And so we started talking, and she went, wait a minute, I filled this out in paperwork 35 years ago. Was it my responsibility to go make sure that they had done it correctly? And while it was not her responsibility to do that, I mean, her employer took on that task. I do think it is our responsibility to make sure that everything is done correctly. And
Mhm.
so I think it needs to be kind of an annual review of, let's go back and make sure that everything is indeed said correctly. When those life happens circumstances, for example, if a death occurs or a divorce occurs, or if you suddenly want to disinherit someone, you need to go back and make those changes,
Mhm.
because it can be devastating if it is not done correctly. And before we leave today, I'll tell you about a fairly well known circumstance that happened with someone who's quite well known across the nation. But let's talk about things that you do need to make sure that they have beneficiaries set up, both contingent and I mean both primary and contingent. For example, your retirement accounts, so your IRAs, your 401ks, your pensions, you need to make sure that those are done correctly. You also need to make sure that they have the correct name, not just a nickname, because that often will mess up things if it ends up having to go to probate or through
You
court. So
mean the
use
person's
the
you
beneficiary's legal name.
okay.
Don't use nicknames. Use
Yep.
their actual legal name. Life insurance policies. I mean, you automatically, that's one that most people don't miss,
Mhm.
because those are required when you set up a life
Mhm.
insurance. And one of the beautiful things about it is they inherit that tax free. So that's one that's typically not missed unless there's a divorce.
Yes.
And that tends to be where they miss the life insurance, or if there's a death in the family.
Mhm.
Um, the PODs, pay on death, which is basically bank accounts. You want to make sure that those are set up. So you would go to your bank or whoever handles, that aspect of your finances. You want to make sure that that pay on death has the beneficiaries set up. Transfer on death, which are your investment accounts. You want to make sure that those have their correct beneficiaries. Like I said, any annuities, that's done at the time. But if there are changes, you need to go back and correct those,
Mhm.
because often those are missed. Some trusts, also need to make sure that those are corrected and updated. HSAs, if you have any business interest. One thing that a lot of people miss, 529 education plans. For example, if you have a 529
Mm.
on your child and it's building for them, and then let's say something really unfortunate happens and the child passes away, you need to go in and change those, because that is it, the ownership obviously changes at that point.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh,
so those
and
are important things that you need to make sure when those changes occur, you need to go back and make sure that they are updated if they have not been done initially.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great point, Debbie. Every account that you have, which this is again why we like to consolidate
Yes.
accounts, because each account is going to have its own beneficiary, right? I
Yes.
mean, if you really want to, you can designate different people. Typically, it's, most of the time your spouse,
Yes.
and, you want to designate them in 10 different areas or how many, accounts. And so just becoming into the routine of designating them as soon as you open the account or as soon
Correct.
as you do something with the account. Um, and honestly, I'm glad that you brought up, big life changes because I
Yeah.
will tell you, I have heard, I mean, this is a loose term, I guess, but I've heard horror stories of
Yes.
people that have accidentally had their divorcee on their
Mhm.
beneficiaries and it ends up going to them and then, without the children in mind,
Yes.
or, they just don't ever change it. And because there's so many areas to change it in, some
Mhm.
things do get inevitably forgotten.
I
And
agree.
it's so important to sit down with your financial advisor and go through, like there's some accounts that you probably just forgot that you even had in
Mhm.
reality. And so it's so important to go through, consolidate your accounts maybe at the
Yes.
same time and confirm all the beneficiaries listed.
Good. Well, and the example that I'm going to give, I'm not going to name a name, but you can probably Google and figure out who it is. There's a quite well-known entertainer in the United States that was in the process of getting a divorce,
Mhm.
and he passed away before the divorce was final. And because he did not change the beneficiaries before the divorce was final and before he died, his children were disinherited, and the
Mhm.
ex-wife got everything. And is, of
Mhm.
course, it's now in court. But unfortunately, those documents often supersede anything. He had a handwritten will, but the
Mhm.
documents are going to supersede, the will or the trust, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
There's another, actor who was extremely popular and well known, died at a very young age, which is ironic because he had experienced, a terminal illness like 4 years. He had plenty of time to change it. That just wasn't on his radar of things to change, and did not have a will, did not have a trust, had not
Mhm.
set up any of his beneficiary information. His wife had to fight for almost 18 months, I believe, in order to access his funds because he had not
Wow.
set her up. And I mean, she was his legal spouse. It
Yep.
should have been, an easy way for her to access it immediately.
Mhm.
And it took her 18 months for the courts to finally deal with it. Um, another mistake that a lot of people will make in, like we've mentioned, divorce. So my advice is when you're going through the divorce, I would go ahead and change it before it's final,
Mhm.
because whatever document you have in place, that's going to be the deciding factor.
So, Debbie, can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
Does it cost money to change a beneficiary?
It depends on who it's with. For example, if you have a trust and you need to change the beneficiary in a trust, often a lawyer will charge you, hopefully, a
Mhm.
minimal fee for doing that.
Mhm.
Banks, any of your employer, those should not cost you a penny.
Mhm.
It typically is only thing that a lawyer has set up that will cost
Okay.
you money. If it is through an insurance company, they are not going to charge you to change a
Mhm.
beneficiary. I mean, my office deals with that on a regular basis. My
Mhm.
clients just call and say, okay, I need to change this beneficiary.
Mhm.
And my office handles that for them, which is one of the beautiful things about having a really good financial advisor. They are going to
Yeah.
do that for you if they're, worth their
Mhm.
weight. So that's very valuable, but typically it's only if it's a lawyer that's involved.
Yeah.
I hope I'm corrected that I've never run across any other situation where they've
Well,
charged.
I mean, I just think at the end of the day, can they just come up with a mass submit for all the beneficiaries for all the accounts? Can
That would
can
be
we
nice, but
create that? I mean, come on, just say like, "Hey, I want this person to be beneficiary for all my accounts," and it'd be so
no,
much easier, but of course, they don't make
no.
it very easy
What's
sometimes,
the
and
commercial that you stayed at some hotel and so therefore you have that ability? No, it doesn't work that way. But A good financial advisor is going to be there to guide you through all of that. I mean,
Mhm.
I've actually sat with clients and have called the employer with them to make sure that it is done correctly. Or I've contacted, the financial institute. I've actually gone to the bank with clients just because if they were so uncomfortable or they were going through a difficult time in their life and they just needed a helping hand.
Mhm.
So a good financial advisor is going to assist you through that, or at least I hope they will.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, beneficiaries, we briefly touched on it earlier, Debbie, but I want to go into more depth into this. We talk about kind of the primary beneficiaries. Can you put more than one primary beneficiary on there? So let's say you have two children, will it basically be split evenly
You
or
can.
how?
What you do is you determine what percentage they will get.
Okay.
For example, if you have two children, you want it to receive it equally. It's typically 50-50. Or if you have
Yep.
three children, it's going to be 34, 33, 33. So
Yep.
you can have more than one primary beneficiary. It just has to add up to 100. So
Okay.
whatever that 100% is, that's who you're going to list as your primaries. Um, Now, another important thing is if you have a primary beneficiary set up and they predecease you, it is
Mm.
extremely helpful if you put who gets that portion. So, for example, when I'm assisting clients with their trusts, the company will say, okay, if they predecease you, who do you want receiving their portion? Do you want it to be per stirpes, which passes along the bloodline, for example, to their children?
Yep.
Or do you want it to go to the other beneficiaries? Or is there someone else you'd like to designate? So it's important that you set that up correctly because that can really slow things down if that primary or even that contingent beneficiary has passed away.
Mhm.
So you need to keep that information up to date as well. Even if it's a contingent beneficiary and they pass away, you need to go in and remove that and then assign that percentage to whoever
Mhm.
it is, because I mean that's extremely important. Um,
Yeah.
you also need to make sure that you have it set up correctly. For example, if you have minor children, you want to make sure that they are
Mhm.
not receiving that inheritance before the age of 18 because someone has to be in charge of that.
Mhm.
And typically, that is either the trustee or the courts. You want
Mhm.
to be the one making that decision and not the courts. And while I sincerely hope that you are choosing trustees wisely, we've all heard of cases where the trustee is not handling things correctly.
Mhm.
It's not often they're not court supervised, and the trustee has a lot of leeway if it's not done correctly. If you
Mhm.
have a special needs child, you need to make sure that that is set up correctly because if they inherit it the wrong way, it can kick them off of their disability. Um,
Okay.
you also need to consider, you need to check with the beneficiaries to see if they are willing to accept it. Because I personally know
Mm.
situations where the beneficiary said, I do not want to receive this. For example, if you're leaving your house to them and they can't afford the taxes on it, that can
Mm.
actually be very damaging to them. If they receive too much money, it can bump them into a higher tax bracket. So, while sometimes we think, oh, this is wonderful. We're going to surprise them with this wonderful, legacy that we're leaving behind, but it may not be in their best interest. So it is very advisable to check with your beneficiaries to make sure that, yes, this is how I want it. And be very careful when you have minor children. That needs to be done correctly.
Yeah, and another question that I have, Debbie, is when I discuss, our listeners and viewers know that I'm getting married this year,
Yes.
and so this is typical for, women, I would say, but my last name will change.
Yes.
So, how does that work? Is it connected to like my social security number or is it connected to my name?
It is often it's just your name.
Okay.
And because there are some organizations that will not ask for the social security number. And I personally have clients that were leaving things to their friends. Their friends did not want to share their social security number with them, which
Yep.
I can't really blame.
But, like,
So
if I'm sending you money and I'm sharing my inheritance or whatever
yes.
with you, wouldn't you think that you'd be comfortable sharing? something?
Well, I mean, it depends on how much you trust that person. Uh, my experience has been that most of the time they are not going to ask for the social security number.
Okay.
I will give you what Gary and I did when we got married. We had already set up a meeting with our lawyer before we got married so that at the time of our marriage, things, flipped
Yeah.
because I mean, I have an acquaintance right now that was engaged 3 months ago and now they are no longer engaged. So if
Mhm.
they had already changed things, that that's a pain in the neck to do. So we
Mhm.
originally had set it up that those changes, the beneficiary information was all going to go into effect, once that marriage license was signed. And then Gary got pneumonia a month and a half before we were going to get married. And he was just in panic mode that he was going to die and he wanted me to be the beneficiary. And, even though I assured him, don't worry about it, you're not going to die. And plus, I mean, I don't really have that power to claim that, but that was what I was saying. But he was very insistent. No, we need to get this straight. So the lawyer actually came to the hospital and signed everything
Mhm.
so that it was, and I had to leave the room so that the lawyer could discuss it with him privately and make sure I wasn't forcing my hand on that.
Yep.
So it is, those kind of decisions you need to make together. But
Mhm.
typically it is with your name that
Okay.
it changes.
Okay, so that's good to know. I mean, I'm
Yes,
guessing for my parents, I'm gonna be listed as their beneficiaries, and
I
so,
would assume so.
that's probably they're gonna need to go back and say, "Change,
Well,
change."
it could slow things down. That still wouldn't mean that you wouldn't get it because
Okay,
you would have your birth certificate. You have ways of proving
okay,
that it is you.
that is good
Um,
to know.
so it can slow things down,
Okay,
especially if it's having to go through probate.
okay, okay,
So
that's
I
great
would
to know.
anytime there's a name change or a life happens situation, just automatically go in and update that
Yes,
beneficiary information. It is
yes,
extremely, extremely important,
yes,
especially since, I mean, I don't know anyone who doesn't want to leave the best legacy that they can for the people
yeah,
that they love. And so just avoiding that topic is not smart. It's not pleasant to have those discussions for many people. They're uncomfortable talking about death.
mhm,
Um, Not my favorite topic,
mhm,
but having, you know, experienced it as a spouse, I know the importance of, okay, we need to go ahead and get these things changed. So actually on my website, I'm going to be posting hopefully by the end of the week of things that you need to make sure that you take care. We talked about this earlier, things that you need to take care of when you lose a spouse. And that is one of the things that you need to take care of
mhm.
is having names either removed or changed on those documents.
Yeah. Well, and think about it. I mean, if so for you, for your instance, your past husband,
Mhm.
late husband, you now have to change everything of yours, right?
Yes.
So you're not only dealing with receiving the
Yes.
things, but you're also like, well, now I have to change my beneficiaries too.
That's correct.
So it's a process. It's kind of like, you're in a two-way street and you gotta figure out where the direction's going, right?
You're correct. And
Um,
you're so right. It's giving and receiving in many
yes.
cases. You need to go back in and double check
Yeah.
on all of those things. And it is just like your car needs tune ups.
Mhm.
This is something that you just need to put on your calendars that you routinely go in and just double check to make sure that, okay, my employer didn't change systems and they actually put it in correctly.
Mhm.
Because it's often too late to do that. I mean,
Mhm.
once some things have occurred, it's not like you can, if, for example, there was a credit card that I needed to cancel and didn't have my late husband's password on it. And it's like it's not like I could call him up in heaven and say, "Excuse me, could you give me your password?"
Yeah.
So you need to routinely go in and check those things and make sure that
Wow.
they're up to date and correct.
See, this is I'm gonna end this episode on a light-hearted note,
Yay.
okay? We, as my best friend and I, we make jokes, I guess, about how we will give each other our cell phones and nobody else will have our cell phone. If we pass away, the only person that will ever have my cell phone is her because there's, things
Mhm.
in there. I'm like, nope, only
Yeah.
you will see you.
Yeah.
And it's just funny that, that you can kind of do that.
Yeah.
It's just something so
Well,
ridiculous,
we
but
had an agreement. My sister and I had an agreement. Now, I used to think that I was not a good housekeeper. My family teased me about it for years.
Mhm.
After my late husband passed away, it didn't take me long to discover that I was not the problem. He was the problem. And I had a clean house. It was just not organized the way I wanted it. And
Mhm.
there were places that were just messy and cluttered that
Mhm.
I didn't like. So one of my sisters and I had an agreement that if I died, she had to get to my house quickly and clean things up before
Yep.
anybody else set foot in my house. So
Uh-huh.
it's smart to set things up that way.
Yeah, and there's like you said, different beneficiaries are good for different things.
Yes, yes,
I
they are.
there's just some things that like my fiance, yeah, I don't know if I
Mhm.
really want him to have certain things. Like
I-
I love
well,
him. I love him to death, but mm,
this may be TMI, but one of my clients was very comfortable sharing her life with me, and she shared that her daughter has very specific instructions that if something happens to she and her husband,
Mhm.
she is to go in and destroy some videotapes.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yep. I can see that. I can see that. Yep. Well, Debbie, this has been a fantastic episode. And, just to end it off by saying beneficiaries are incredibly important. And even, knowing that they trump wills and trusts
Yes,
is, kind of
that's huge.
huge, right? And that's basically the number one thing. When any life thing changes, marriage, divorce, children, even considering job changes and different 401k accounts and
Mhm.
whatever it is, you need to make sure that you're keeping updated on the beneficiaries and making
Yes.
sure that your legacy is, being honored by someone that you want it to be, right? And just confirming that. There's no harm in confirming and no harm in annual checking. So, Debbie, any final thoughts before we close out?
I would encourage you to check with your financial advisor and see if they are willing to assist you with this.
Mhm.
And if they're not, you may want to consider finding a different financial advisor. But it's extremely important. It will, like my clients often tell me, whew, this took a load off of my shoulders that I did not realize existed.
Mhm.
Because somewhere in the back of their mind, they probably had worried about it or wondered about it.
Yeah.
And so, my clients have said, I did not really realize that that was weighing on my mind. So take care of your beneficiaries.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Debbie, why don't you share with our listeners and viewers how they can schedule a complimentary consultation with you?
Very good. Well, the easiest way is to call my office at 866 247 5695. And my operations manager, Andy, would love to assist you with that. I also encourage you to check out our other podcast and get to check out lovely Jacqueline. Yeah. Every week.
Yes.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or YouTube. And you can look up Debbi Marcum or Retirement Your Way.
Yes. And we are also on the website, so feel
Yes.
free to check out any, past episodes and also please comment or give us more ideas of what you want to hear and what you want to learn about because we are happy to do that. We can find enjoyment out of any topic, so we are here to, provide whatever we can for you and as our listeners and viewers. So,
I'd
uh,
also love to thank, especially some friends and clients that have shared this, especially if they know that someone is going through something that they think, oh, this podcast might really assist them. So I'd love to thank them for sharing
yeah.
podcast information with them.
Yeah, me too. I thank you guys too. All right, Debbie. Well, it was great to see you. And that does it for this episode of Retirement Your Way with our host, Debbi Marcum.